yourself. Welcome to From Employee to Entrepreneur, Creating Your Own Lane. And as you know, I'm not reading bios. You all can go look, Google, LinkedIn. I'm gonna let them tell their story, which is how we gonna get there. I am not eating up the time on bios. Rodney, Courtney, Rhonesha, come on out, bring them out, bring them out. We're gonna get into it right now. Right now.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Courtney.
Hello. How are y'all doing?
There's a little bit of digital traffic for our girl Ro, and we know she is traveling and she is doing the most and still made time for us because that's what y'all do for the foundation and for the team. And we love you for it. So I say we just jump right in.
Okay.
So now, Rodney, I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
Many students believe they have to choose between a traditional career and entrepreneurship. Is that true? And how did you experience being an employee relative to becoming an entrepreneur? And did that prepare you for what you got yourself into?
Well, first, thank you so much for having this panel. I would have loved when I was sitting in the seat of all the students and even the recent alum to hear about this. So I'm here to say I'm battle tested and excited to talk about my entrepreneurial journey. Um, just to give everybody a heads up, I'm a board member for the BowenFoundation. I'm also an alum, obviously. I did my internship, and my corporate sponsor was Fox. And I was at KTBC in Austin, Texas. And to answer the question emphatically, I do not think you have to choose. I actually think it's better to start in a corporate environment before you get into your entrepreneurial journey. For me specifically, it taught me discipline. It taught me how to network, how to understand value in the storytelling that I was doing as a journalist at the time. After I graduated from Howard University, I worked at CBS in DC and in New York for the network for 10 years. It was there where I cut my teeth as a producer. And now with the company that I founded, Tiny Hawk Media, which I can share all the details of what we do, I'm doing exactly that in large form. But one of the things I think institutionally, a lot of us who are entrepreneurs don't realize when we take that leap are the specifics of learning about accounting and how to actually run and operate a business beyond the actual doing of what we were good at and what got us there. But I think you first have to get good at something. And to do that under a company where you have benefits and where you have mentorship and the opportunity to learn from so many is invaluable to do it at the companies that you're interning or working at now, and learning the ropes.
Thank you, Rodney, for wrapping your early story into your answer, which I appreciate the professional that you are. And Courtney, answer the same question because I'd be curious to know if you had a different perspective, if you would make the same argument, because I low key agree. We need to have the formal experience in the building to learn the politics, to learn emotional intelligence, to learn how to navigate through conflict, right? To be thoughtful about introverts, extroverts, thinkers, feelers. How are we showing up in the world and how do we navigate human beings?
Yeah.
That said, would you agree that you were grateful to have had a more formal experience, or do you think you could have just jumped right out and started what you have been doing?
I think pursuing anything without an education in whatever it is that you want to do is just like a fool's errand, right? So that education can look like a lot of different things, but I still think that being a student of whatever you were passionate about is incredibly valuable. So when I came up through Emma Bowen, I was class of 2015, and I was with Comcast as my corporate sponsor. I was working in corporate communications, which is, I think, now the furthest thing from the work that I do. But there were things that I learned while I was inside of Comcast that were incredibly helpful for me. A little bit of backtrack. Well, maybe just to fill y'all in. So I am a chef and culinary creative director, and I run my own culinary creative agency called My Art Creative. And in that, we do branded recipe development for food and beverage companies. We do consulting for culinary programming for real estate development companies, and media brands, and partner with companies like Adobe to produce dinners that are curated and experiential for them through food, right? So I kind of talk to two different audiences. The first of them is like the home cook, right? So we are making content for them through these brands. And then the second part of it is getting to the consumer, like in a community building sort of way. I think you cannot get to the you can get to community without going through corporate, but it is sometimes really helpful to understand how to best empower yourself through corporate so that you can build community with infrastructure in place and in mind. What I do right now would burn me out if I did not know about partnerships, if I did not know about strategic alliances, if I did not know what it looked like to build relationships inside of someone else's container. And that's not to say that you can't do it. It makes it harder for sure. And so I really enjoyed being able to pick things up during my time with Comcast. That stuck with me about corporate comms and what sort of events are we putting on for employees. It was how I came to understand and really develop a love for the DE&I space. And every single company I've been at in the time since, I was the person to pilot that program because it was just such a love that I had for gathering people inside of a corporate space. And then later on took that and ran with it in the world of food. But I do think that there's a lot of value in, and I'll say this quite crassly because I'm very blunt when it comes to these things, but learning on someone else's dime is the least expensive way to learn a lesson. And so I'll leave that there for now.
That part.
Okay, can we talk about that part, learning on someone else's dime, even if you decided to go back for certification or you decided to do continuing education? There's something about a corporation that has all the resources available for employees to tap into that you don't have to always pay out of pocket. Some you do, and then you get reimbursed, right? Depending on what the process is. But I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
Girl, while we're here on you, given the world that you are in, and you and I just talked last week, and I know that you were on a tour and you've been all the different places in less than like a 3-week window. Can you talk a bit about when we hear people say bet on yourself? It
Mm-hmm.
sounds great in theory.
Yeah.
I know you both know what this is, as does Ro. Can you just share a bit about what it means in practice to really bet on yourself as you've done?
Yes, yes. I think in order to best answer that question, I'll also give everyone some additional context here that underneath my creative agency, I run a supper club called the Brown Butter Supper Club. We are, to my knowledge, the largest supper club for sure on the East Coast. And I'm trying to figure out how to fact check that we are not the biggest across the country. But I think the way that we got here is twofold. The first of them is that the first bet I had to take on myself was a bet of visibility. People will come to experiences if they do not know who you are, just because they're like, the food sounds good. And I came across this chef just kind of out in the wild and I'm taking a bet on that. And sometimes that is how that works, right? And you end up meeting really wonderful people that way. But there's a very particular type of person who kind of fuels their experiential pipeline by taking risks, right? And then there's a sort of person who I think wants to feel comfortable with what they're getting ready to spend their money on. And so long before there was a supper club, I was building a platform that centered specifically Black women and are returning to ourselves. I was in my late 20s at this time and just experiencing a lot of life. And I was sharing these things very publicly, quite openly. And you and I have said before that, like, I'm a very open book, right? Anything you want to know, I'll tell you. And I think that because I led with that sort of openness, when people saw me returning to a space where I was ready to serve people again, they were interested in being there. One, because I think they knew that my heart for service was a genuine one, but it had shown up across the years very consistently. So I think the first bet is understanding that, like, there is currency and visibility. and that all currency doesn't get spent in the same ways, but it does hold value. And so by the investment that I made in myself, by just like showing up, being willing to kind of do the work of explaining myself for myself and allowing other people to see it, it brought me an audience who was willing to go wherever else I went as I've been building out these other platforms. The other piece of that though is the financial bet, right? When I started this supper club, I was like, this is a hobby. I just want to get together with some girlfriends and have a very sexy dinner. Like, I just wanted to have like cute dinner and drinks, and host maybe like maximum 20 people and be a part of the community. What has happened is I'm the community gatherer. And so I don't belong to the community in the same way anymore because now I fund the building of the community. And when I'm thinking about it, there's a loss on the one side where I'm not in it, getting the same spiritual benefit, right, of being the person who's sitting at the table. But by being the person who sets the table, by being the person who takes the risk, you become the hub, and that's also been really wonderful. So the way that we've grown has been, I think, both with people's trust in mind, but also there's just been a significant amount of investment in order to up level. We had to launch memberships at the top of the year where people prepay for the dinners that they want to attend to a very small group of people, so that we had starting capital for the year that didn't just get tied to what was going right back into the event, right? So people think that what happens in the event space is like you make a ton of money and you keep all that money and there are sponsors in there, and then like all, and you're just like rolling around in it like Scrooge McDuck. Okay, what is his name? Is it Scrooge McDuck? Did I get that right? Is that him? Piles of money. So when I think about that, I'm like, oh my God, nothing could be further from the truth when you care about the experience that you're giving to your guests. So, like 90% of the money that I make with the supper club goes back into the supper club experience. And the other part of it is to advance the experience for the next time. So, it's a trade off because this is my most successful venture in terms of revenue. We're in the multiple six figures, but I'm not holding on to that because it has to go right back into the experience. So the loss here is also the opportunity cost of me not having the bandwidth of taking on a corporate job, right? That would pay me for my brain, but this job is taking my physical labor, it's my mental labor, it's the labor of the people that I love. It's making sure that like there is money so that I can actually pay, because we don't let people volunteer for the Brown Butter Supper Club. So you can't volunteer, baby, but you can get paid, right? So we make sure that we're paying you, and so we're paying an above market rate. I want to make sure that we're able to create actual opportunities for people who are coming along, and so all of that weight is sort of on my mind all the time. But it's also the weight worth holding because this is so valuable, I think, to the community who's like here and in it with me, that I wouldn't do it any other way.
So let me tell you what's funny. And honestly, I don't know that I would have thought about it in this way until you said it. I've often said the further up the food chain you go, which if you're ambitious and you are hungry and you want more and you just like, gimme, 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 then you're going to move up the food chain, right? Because your performance is what's going to lead before your personality is in the room so that people are talking about you. And you called it currency a little earlier. We do have currency in these relationships, people who get into rooms before we get into rooms, who can help set the table for us and set us up for success. I don't know that I would have thought about it for you as an entrepreneur in the way that you described it. I know as a recruiter, I love recruiting. I love placing. I like going out and actively recruiting. But the reality is, as you move up in your career, you actually move away from the things that once
Yeah.
endeared you or the things that you love doing that got you where you are, right? Because people see the passion, they see that you have the skill set, cross transferable skills included, and they're like, I want you and I want you here and I'm going to keep moving you. And then
Mhm.
you realize one day, oh my God, I'm overseeing it all, but I'm no longer in it.
Yeah.
But for you as an entrepreneur, you and Rodney and Ro, you kind of get to do both. You
Mhm.
get to get down on the ground because you have to devil in the details. You got to know what's going on, as you and I talked about last week. And then there's going up 80,000 feet in the air because you're a visionary, right? We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the fact that you are a visionary. You both are. And you're hiring people. So other people's livelihoods are in your hands. And that's very real. Rodney, talk to me about building something is one thing, building an audience is another. And I kind of like what Courtney said, which is if you build it, they will come, is a version of what she just said, regardless as to how well known you may be or not. How did you establish credibility? and earn people's trust. Maybe when folks didn't necessarily know who you were. How come your phone is ringing off the hook now where you have to turn down? I'm going to whisper, you have to turn down opportunities. You can't say yes to everything or you'd be overwhelmed. And I know that because we've talked about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I think the biggest build and understanding on what my audience was. Initially, we live in this hyper fixation on social media and this idea of I have to show my success to the world. And I actually realized the more I was making my way up, I'm in the film industry now, I'm in the television industry. We own IP and we also do creative marketing. And through that, a lot of the brands and a lot of the platforms that we work with, they're the focus and they need to be elevated. And so we take a back seat. So, what my audience is and who I'm serving now is those executives that we want to work with and be proof points that we're capable of one, dealing with the multi-million dollar budgets, and two, being able to facilitate the teams that they need to do it through us as a general contractor, so to speak. So, for the shift on when I was a journalist at CBS to where I am now, the visibility was we're getting our, and I'm using this as a comparison when I was producer and doing some on air reporting. There's millions of viewers on CBS, and you get to track that and you get to see that with the ratings. Now we track literally in Excel documents every touch point that we have with every person that we meet with. And one of the best experiences, and I'll bring this all the way full circle to Emma Bowen, in my internship. When I was at Fox 7, I worked in the sales department. And I remember that they had their sales book, and this sales agent, I can't remember her name because I would send her a thank you note now, but I'll never forget this. But she would track daily every touch point she had with those companies that she was trying to pitch to do their integrated ads on the web and on the broadcast. And as she was doing that, I'm like, she's so meticulous. But she knew when I was going in to talk to this car salesman owner that he was interested in the daily spots because he was trying to sell more minivans. And he knew that that's the viewership, right? Well, I'm doing the exact same thing now. We are pitching a project with the referees for the World Cup. We've been filming with them for the last year and a half, and we're working with our agents, our talent agents, and they said we need to sell this show during the World Cup because everybody will be paying attention. And we're going to do it right before the final game because we know that's when all of our buyers will be paying attention.
Mhm.
So those transferable skills, if you can imagine, were there. And to answer your question, knowing your audience is key. You just have to recognize who that audience is and what's important once you get into the weeds of what you actually do and what you're actually selling.
Can I add something to that?
Of course, build on it, build.
I think because it's so helpful to hear all of the different ways that like audience knowledge can kind of show up, right? And then there is also there's empirical data, and in addition to that, and there are the Nielsen's and and the business reports and the Duns and Bradstreets of the world that are really really helpful when it comes to being able to do those sorts of assessments. But when you're early on in your career and you don't always have access to those tools, one of the key things that you can do is figure out how to be a social listener, right? There's a whole category of career called social listening. And so it's how are you tapped into what's happening inside of the culture? There are whole agencies that build out these like trend reports every single year. I get them all that I subscribe to so many, but I get them from food companies specifically and hospitality kind of agencies who are looking at what are the emerging trends, right? So everybody remembers the Dubai chocolate and how it just kind of like took over the whole world, I feel like. But there were predictions that that was going to come. And so sometimes like you're able to access these things through some of these like reporting tools. And if you just look in certain places, depending on your industry, somebody will kind of aggregate all of that information and hand it over in a way that is like a white paper or something, and just allows you to kind of ingest a lot of information quickly. But the other one is I'm fairly pro social media, of course, but I think one of the ways that you can kind of like stay tapped into what's going on inside of the culture is by following people outside of, or following agencies or businesses outside of your usual bubble. And then beyond that, if you want to know what your audience is thinking, I think sometimes people overcomplicate it and try to make guesses for their audience when you could just ask them. People are oftentimes willing to do a 1 to 2 quick question survey. If you make it fun, kind of gamify it for them, and there's some sort of reward for them at the end, however short, they are able to like really give you some insight into how they think about their day, or the things that they're eating, or the TV shows that they're watching, or what sort of things they'd be interested in seeing. And so even in the micro, you can just ask the people who you would like to be your intended audience what they're hoping to see, not just from you, but across the media landscape in general. And it's incredibly insightful. Issa Rae said it years ago, and it's famous for a reason, but like networking across your peers has so much value. And being able to ask them where they're at and what they're hoping for is sometimes better than trying to guess the needs of an audience that's out of reach for you.
I'm over here trying to take all the notes so that when we get to the end and I do that perfect wrap up, there are so many gems that you all are dropping right now. And so I have to ask, Courtney, while we're here with you, you mentioned social media. Social media often shows the highlight reel of
Mhm,
entrepreneurship, right? The glamorous side, the everything's great, look at me, because we're selling a business, we're selling an experience, which is very real.
mhm,
However, what's one thing about being your own boss that people do not talk about enough? That may not be as sexy as we think it is.
mm. Decision fatigue.
Woo!
I am constantly making decisions.
Yes, yes.
Always. And I think there's a point in this level of leadership where I'm realizing that I might have built my business in a way that I'm lonely. And it's, it's hard to kind of like accept that, right? But there aren't too many people who can share all of the context that fit inside of the decisions to help make strong decisions. And so oftentimes what I find is that I'm like outsourcing the parts of information that I kind of can, and then taking back what gets gathered for me, and then hoping to bring it together into something cohesive. And I would say that like that is, if you are someone who really like enjoys thoughtfulness, right? I think entrepreneurship is an exercise in mindfulness above and beyond like all other things. You have to like really use your brain to solve the problems. And what your brain can't solve, you have to pay somebody usually to, or, have developed a relationship so that you can bring people into your business who can help you think through some of these complicated things. And I think that there's a lot of value in that. So one, you really have to trust your own mind, and feel like you are doing what you're doing for the greater good of your business. But what I will also add, and this has just been something that I've learned, is like, even though I'll be in my close friends on social venting about how the roof caved in at the Baltimore Airbnb where I have my full staff staying, and I might come on my story and then kind of share a little vignette of that, the pain points about me running my business are not my audience's problem. And so I think what will happen sometimes is that people feel like their platform is also the place for them to vent. And I cannot tell you how much that is not true. Okay. My audience, my problems are not their problems. When they come to my dinner, they don't care that I couldn't get, my hands on the short rib, and that the people had to, they paid their 175 and they want the meal. Right. And so what do you do to make sure that you're prioritizing that in a way that feels seamless? I think having a bank of make goods in your back pocket that you can kind of always pull from that don't exhaust you is really helpful. And that was also great in my corporate career. It was like, what are the things that I'm willing to do in order to smooth something over where something got missed? And I think knowing that early will also keep you out of sticky situations as you advance in your career. And you're with people who are also looking for leverage in different sorts of ways. But now, like, this is a boundary that I'm comfortable with kind of pushing a little bit. Here's a place where I'm willing to take on some discomfort because I know what it will also get me. But that discomfort should never be against your morals. It should be like against your comfort zone. So I feel like those are the things that people don't talk about a ton. I think in an era of, and I feel like maybe some of y'all can relate to this, us Emmas, but if you've ever gotten a hey boo text, right? When you're on your way to go get your hair done, or you're on your way to an appointment, and somebody lets you know at the last minute that like there's this thing, and it was otherwise fairly avoidable, but now you're trapped in between somebody's lack of planning and the inconvenience of you needing your things, and so you can't be too upset, but you still have the right to be upset. Is what is your hey boo plan? You have to have one. And I think it's so important, and people don't necessarily realize that. But like, I've never sent a text like that without having something similar or better to come back to people with. So that's just my little one, too.
Girl, you know I like that. A hey boo plan. That
Yes.
is speaking in our first language, which I appreciate. And I also love that you explained it. Looking at the students joining us today, many of whom clearly are interns and or recent graduates or early career professionals, or we've got some folks in the room who their ladder is not up against the right wall. What is the one thing they should start doing now if they think entrepreneurship, freelancing, content creation, consulting, business ownership in any capacity may be part of their future? What are the things they should start doing? And I'm asking, what are the things that they should stop doing in the event that they may have started doing something that's not good for their brand or the business?
Mm.
Rodney, I'm going to toss that over to you, but Courtney, I want to come back to you on that one too.
Yes. So two things. I think financially, one of the things that is undervalued is your personal credit. Any bank loan that I have got or we've received, even as a company, the initial loans use my credit first. And that was important that I had been building that over the course of my career and the steady salary that I received. So it is invaluable for you to make sure if you haven't pay your credit card bills. If you don't have a credit card, think about getting one smartly and using it for your expenses that you know you can cover with your paycheck to keep building credit. And if you're fortunate enough to have parents that do have credit cards, ask them to open up a line for you. Don't use it because they'll use it, but you'll be able to benefit from their credit. That is huge. One, even if you don't want to become an entrepreneur, I still think you should do that. The second piece is understand that when you become an entrepreneur, no one is advocating for you but you. So if you are the quiet person who just puts your head down and gets your work done, that is not going to work if you want to start a business, and you have to start advocating for yourself. So start practicing in that way. I was an entrepreneur while I was at CBS. I've learned that term recently since leaving. And by that, what it obviously means is I was being an entrepreneur in my career, but still working for someone else. How that manifested, I had a checklist on everything that I wanted to learn in the roles that I started at, even as an intern to a PA, all the way up to a coordinating producer for 48 hours. When you start those opportunities, I started with a time limit. I said I only want to be in this role for 2 years. If I'm in it longer than 2 years, what am I doing? That directly applies to how I look at how I'm growing the business and the goals and the metrics that I set for what our teams are doing. And so those skill sets that you think you should just be able to build are invaluable to start now wherever you are. And the last thing, and this is something that you see all throughout our culture, there is no self made. You are built on your community, lean on them, network not only across, I network quote unquote down. And I don't mean down, I mean people that you may not think could help you have helped in so many different ways to make certain connections. I am still one of the things that I always do is even in the office in which we sit now, I am friends with the security guard
Yeah.
because I want to know who's coming in and out of the office, what opportunities there are. And that was a skill set that I learned and formed just by nature of I wanted to talk to another Black person in some of the spaces I was in, and
Mhm.
oftentimes that was us. So treat everyone kindly,
Mhm.
and continue to build your network and get your credit up. And the last piece too, I'll say when you are under 26, and tell me if I'm wrong because this didn't exist, if you can imagine, when I graduated. But Obamacare is vital health insurance, right? So if you have an idea and you want to step out on your own, be thinking about that as well. There are many states that are able to provide insurance through the statewide funded, but those are all things that I would want to know before I make that bet, and what I think you should know before you get into it.
Yeah.
First of all, Courtney, before I even turn to you, because I want to hear what you have to say, Rodney, here's the thing. And this is why we are in community and why Emma does what Emma does. We had a financial guru yesterday, Ross Maconomics, talk about the importance of finances, not just in general, but specifically around if you can. Caveat, your parents have to have good credit or it doesn't help you. You just talked about attaching oneself to your parent, let them issue you a credit card or issue credit to you, not that you use it, but so it starts building your credit from now.
Mhm.
We couldn't have planned this. I didn't plant a seed and tell you that this happened yesterday, but this is how we know that when we're in community and we're giving advice and we're paying it forward and we're lifting as we climb and we're doing all the things right, that it all starts to add up, right? You start to hear things and it's like that's an echo. He could not say that enough yesterday, and here you just echoed the same sentiment. There's so much more you've said that he also echoed, but I'm gonna stop there until I wrap. On that note, Courtney, talk about it. Drop some gems around what they should start doing and what they should stop doing.
I think something that makes you a beast, like in any company that you work for, whether it's yours or anyone else's, is understanding what moves revenue. I was very curious in the early stages of my career. And my first job coming out of school was at a PR firm. I did not necessarily want to work in PR, but having not formally studied it, landing there, I knew was a lot of people's dream role. And so while I was there, I got curious about all of the different sides of the business. Now, of course, I wanted to be on the food and beverage side of the accounts as an account executive, but I got curious about the financials. I got curious about corporate comms. One of the sponsors here from Fleischman Hillard, Gerard Carney, right, ended up becoming one of my major champions as I was in the early stages of my career. He was so intrigued by whatever I was doing at the company that I was at. And he was like, if there's ever an opportunity for us to work together, let's, because I was very driven by understanding how revenue gets made. Oftentimes, I think as marketers, we are the spenders of the money, and it's very hard to attach back where the ROI kind of is, right? That return on investment is a little trickier as we talk about like multi-level funnels, and as we talk about experiential campaigns, and as we talk about these activations, and as we talk about community building and building goodwill and doing things for the plot. All right. So when we talk about all of those things, you can sometimes, I think there are people and companies that do it really, really well. Smaller businesses have to be incredibly mindful about how we track for where the revenue is coming in from and how it's attached to our efforts, because it informs our marketing budgets. But when we're thinking about this, I think any organization that you come into, as often as you can, ask robust questions. Not so much that they think you're giving a spy, but like ask enough questions about how the inner workings of the business run. Ask about the customer relationship. See if you can sit in with the customer insights team if there is one. Understand or try to understand and then have someone interpret the data for you. Those things I think become really key. And when you are someone who can sit inside of a big organization or small and have at least a base level understanding of how all those pieces work, it goes a long way for your goodwill and your relationships inside of those companies. I was known for getting in with, like, I'd take the tech team to lunch and I'd be like, talk to me about all the things that you have to build on the back end. Right. And this is when I was working at HelloFresh and Blue Apron. So these are two companies where yes, there is a technical element to the work that we were doing, but what people understand is we're putting food in the boxes and we're sending it to consumers. But there are all sorts of systems and backends that must be understood. So I think it's really key, especially when you're early career, to go in curious And people will appreciate your curiosity. One, because I guarantee you that nobody has really asked about how all the dots connect in a while. The people who are asking that are at the very, very top, and they're in rooms and conversations that we're just like not in. So if you can be the person who asks the questions and you carry a little bit of that knowledge with you, I think is very valuable. That's for entrepreneurship or not. The second piece, and actually, I'll just jump because the curiosity, I think, is just something that everybody needs to have. It's the best skill that you can pick up. You can learn how to become more curious about people and things. And I just will continue to encourage that. On the flip side of things, not to do, right? In a world where I think, especially post pandemic, and I really feel for this generation, because you are in a world that looks very different than all of the like touch points that we all had, to get together as frequently as possible, to have the folks, like really in it with you, to conference in the same way, and the etiquette of the things that we were encouraged to do. I think it's so key that you figure out a comfortable form of etiquette for yourself and then carry on with that in mind, right? So even when it comes to like writing your emails, having an air of formality about you, that allows you to be unimpeachable, I think will be really key. And then the last thing, which is I meant to start this off with the answer of like things not to do. But I think don't be lax, right? I think it's hard enough. I think there's a sentiment that people have about younger generations that you're just not willing to do any work. I know for a fact that that is not true. But I think that there's a sometimes casual air that people feel, from informality. And I think when you put those structures in place so that people know, like, nah, I'm serious and I'm here to get to it. There's work I want to do and I'm hungry for that work. It's sometimes needs to be very directly communicated, especially when it feels cringe to say it out loud. But like being hungry to be successful is actually one of the coolest things that you can do. It's like so uncringe. But sometimes I think it's worth directly saying. So try not to be lax as you're pursuing whatever you're passionate about. And that will go a long way. People love effortful people.
Intentionality, intentionality, intentionality. And I love that you said that because you're right. It may not necessarily be factual, but there is the appearance of or the stereotype as we think about the different generations. And how do you use that to your advantage? And how do you get ahead of it when you already know there might be negative connotations? So then you move differently. I love the being a little more formal in communications.
Mhm.
Oh my God, there's so much that you all are dropping. Listen, I'm just going to full disclosure. It's 3:41. I'm going to ask one more question that was on my list. And then I'm jumping all the way into the questions from the fellows and whoever all else is in the living room, because as I'm talking to you all, the chat is pinging, which means my folks are seeing all the questions in the larger chat. So I'm going to jump right into that. So one more. And this is so, what gave you the confidence to stop waiting for a seat at someone else's table and build your own, Rodney? And I ask you that because I know your journey, and I know there was a pivotal point in your career that you then decided on you say you're shaking your head, and you decided on the back end of that experience. Hold on a minute, wait a minute. I could be doing more. I could be touching more people. I could be adding value and impact. What was that turning point for you? I know what it was, but I want them to know.
Yes, no, I appreciate that. So I would say my catalyst for starting the business was actually in 2021. And I started the business technically in 2020, but in 2021, I decided I was going to leave CBS. At that time, I was a producer working here in Dallas for the national network for CBS. And we were just finishing our two-part series for 48 Hours about Ahmaud Arbery. If you're familiar, during the Black Lives Matter movement, everyone knows George Floyd, but before George Floyd, there was Breonna Taylor, and before Breonna Taylor, there was Ahmaud Arbery. Those three untimely murders were something that was a vocation of mine to make sure that I was covering while I was at CBS, all the while doing all the other assignments. The reason why that became a vocation, I'll step into a tragedy that occurred to my family. In 2002, my uncle was shot and killed by Dallas police officers. It was a mistaken identity. We later found out that they said he reached for their gun, this police officer. And the next thing we know, 7 hours later, he was dead. We sued the city of Dallas and the police department. And during that experience, I was 13. I got to see what it was like to fight for justice. And this was during a time when social media wasn't where it exists, and you have those viral moments. And so, if you can imagine, for me at that very young age, to see one of my only uncles dying are dead, and then my family having to go through the justice system and try to get that justice, it was difficult. And one of the really pivotal moments where I realized how invaluable media and journalism was the Dallas Morning News, which is the local paper here. Uh, got my grandfather's name wrong in the paper. It was the second article that was written. They called him uh, John all throughout the article. His name is James, and my family was part of my friends like, damn, they can't even get our names right, right? And so through that, I was like, I want to be a journalist. A few years later, my mom found the BowenFoundation, and that started my career. Uh, so if you can imagine, if you're seeing 20 years later, as I'm doing the producing and leading the effort for CBS about a young man similar to my uncle that was shot and killed through racial injustice. What I found was, for the first time out of all of the killings that I went through, my personal family, all the way through um, Trayvon Martin and to Ahmaud Arbery, this was the first time that they ever were charged and ended up getting a life sentence for what they did.
Mm.
And so I called my wife, and I was in tears. Our correspondent at the time was on set. He was looking at me like, "Is everything okay?" And I was like, "This is it. This is the moment. This is when I'm going to take the leap, because I want to now." I tried to show our humanity, and I think I helped successfully show why our lives matter. But I want to show how it doesn't just matter at the end of our life, but the continuation of who we are, and we can live these full lives. And so I developed a company to be able to tell more of our stories thoughtfully. And so I know that was long, but that is what gave me the catalyst and the opportunity to then start the company. And so we now do scripted and unscripted films, and we finance those projects. We find the directors, etc., and we're telling the story of our humanity. And it's not just about Black folks. I believe that if any of us are not free, none of us are. And so we have to have the opportunities to tell all of our stories in their fullness. And I believe that those that come from marginalized communities have the true eye on telling what is really happening, what's really occurring, whether it's a comedy, whether it's a horror movie, etc. We can do it from a lens that will be truth telling. And so now I infuse that journalism that I carried for so long into all the stories that we do.
I knew when I asked that question that you would go right to the heart of your why and your how and your what. And the irony of you being able to do so however many years after, but you're very clear. You always have been clear on your why, what your purpose is. When we talk about intentionality, I was getting full thinking about where you were about to go with the journey, because I know your journey, and I needed the audience and I needed our living room to fully appreciate what you've done, and when you decided, more importantly, to transition out of a corporate environment that was working for someone else and bet on you and build your own organization and put your ladder up against your own wall. Thank you. Thank you, because it's inspiring and it's necessary for us to share our stories, and we don't always have a platform to do so. Thank you. I
Right.
know that Ro, there she is. Hi, Ro. Welcome to the conversation. Happy to see you and receive you. Girl, I know you've got a lot going on. We know, and we're happy to have you with us. And I'm going to set the stage for you. We've been talking about the highs and the lows, the wins, the losses, what works, what doesn't work, what's some good advice, what are things they should start doing, stop doing. And now to have you in the fold, if you wouldn't mind, share with this next gen what it is that you do and how you got there.
Having me. I'm so sad that I missed the majority of the conversation, but happy to see my peers on this stage. Rodney, you are incredible. I'm so happy.
I think Ro is out of the country and her Wi-Fi may be a little wonky. So we're going to take her as we can get her because she's a powerhouse. And the love that you all will feel and see amongst the alums is not manufactured. I came into this organization feeling the love and the camaraderie and the respect and the hand-holding that goes on in this organization, which is why I say we're a little gang. All right. I know that Ro is going to try to she's going to try to figure that out. And in the meantime, Rodney, again, thank you. I'm going to jump into, hold on, the questions. Okay. Someone actually had a question around the beginning, which I answered. Thank you, Anna. Hey, Ro, we know it may be a little funky where you are. There is a question in here around how did you validate your idea before fully committing to it? And what are some mistakes first-time founders make when launching a venture, and how can it be avoided? And I'm going to toss that to you, Courtnee.
That's such a great question. I think the hardest thing to learn. Again, okay, so if you are going to pursue entrepreneurship, and I feel like the best advice I could give to anybody who is like pursuing entrepreneurship is you have to know your own mind, right? You have to know it will require, I think, more of you than a corporate role might, in the sense that you are regulating all things, right? So you have to regulate your own emotions. You also have to dictate what's happening inside of your business, who needs to do it in order for those things to happen. Oftentimes it is going to fall to you. And I think there's a degree of that you have to be okay with in order to get the most out of an entrepreneurial experience. I think the hardest thing to learn on my own was how to actually be on my own. So I was very used to, and I've said this before to you, Nikki, that like I've really prided myself on being like a corporate mouthpiece, right? I would go, you could point me in the direction of like any mission if I believed in it too, and I would just like speak truth to that, and I would like love it so much. And it was very easy for me to evangelize for other people's brands. But what I felt was this sense of misplacement when it came to building mine, and I couldn't quite articulate it. I think I said to you before that I had the capacity, but I didn't have the language. And so entrepreneurship will force that language out of you. Like you are going to have to be able to explain to people like what you do. And so that is something I think for sure for you to keep in mind. If you can articulate it, then likely you can build it. But sometimes you can build something without being able to articulate it. And that is still maybe the hardest part. So I think focus first to me on my end is like what you can communicate, you can master. And so if you can figure out how to explain to people, like, this is the work that I do, this is the work that I want to be doing, here are the people that I would need to come alongside me on this vision or this journey that I have. And much of it will get figured out as you go. But I think the first thing for me always felt like the hardest part, which is I don't know how to explain what I'm doing to people now. Until the Supper Club came into existence, there wasn't a thing I could point at and say, hey, here's something tangible. I was just kind of like, I run this agency and like, it's doing pretty well. And here's the work that I do for clients. Oh, where can I see it? You kind of can't, right? Like everything was in post-production for like the first year. It's like, I don't have anything to show for all this work that I'm doing. So I think you also have to be okay with that. Is like, you're going to do a lot of work that nobody sees for a little bit.
Facts. And continue to tell yourself it's worth the energy and it's worth the behind the scenes until you can do the big reveal that it's worth all of the work that's going to go into it and the heartache. Okay, Ro, we're going to come back to you, girlfriend. As you share what you do, if you could wrap it around, there's a question in the chat that says, What is the number one thing you would tell yourself if you were given a chance to go back in time and restart your business today? And I hope we didn't lose Ro, but maybe we have. Oh. Okay, Rodney,
I don't
you
know
gonna
how
take? Oh,
much
there
further
she
I
is.
can go back in time because I actually started my company when I was 19 years old. I started my company while I was an Emma Bowen Fellow, and it was something I started on the side. But if I could tell myself something, is you are equipped, you have what you need to be successful and to survive and to build something brilliant and great that the world needs. And I want to give some context and color. I'm here at Cannes Lions Film Festival, Cannes Lions, a festival of creativity. So all of the brands, agencies, and marketers and decision makers that have budget are here. I also agreed and committed to be part of this because I really believe in the Emma Bowen community, and I wouldn't be where I am without Emma Bowen. So just, when you're an entrepreneur, it's not going to look fancy all the time. It's not going to be 100% perfect all the time, and you just have to do it anyway. Do it scared, do it afraid, do it without seeing the full staircase, and it will come together. Like, I'm just going to show you the room. Hopefully I have a good enough signal. But these are like the biggest brands, agencies, and marketers together in this room. I started out on the journalism side of the media industry, but I recognize the power of going where the money is in order to tell the stories that I want to tell. And so that's my now mission, a motivating factor is to figure out how to bring the money to the platforms that are telling the stories that matter. And often those are platforms that are independent, like myself, like Rodney's platform. And it takes one of us to be in these rooms, get on planes, and be at these dinners, and it looks fun and fabulous. But we're here working and connecting because everything happens through relationships. But Emma Bowen gave me that foundation because anything that you do in media as a journalist translates as a skill set to entrepreneurship. You walk into the newsroom in the morning, you have no idea what story you're going to work on, what sources you're going to have available, but 5 o'clock comes, you have a full package. That is what really it takes to be an entrepreneur. You're building the plane as you fly it. And so I would just say you are equipped. Just continue to show up, build relationships, be yourself, and learn.
Girl, I so appreciate you because I could see the room you're in. I think you are where Monique Nelson is. So I appreciate you even pulling yourself out mentally to do this with us. And for anyone who didn't hear, because I heard, she said at 19, I need y'all to understand at 19, while she was an Emma Fellow, she started her business. So when she says you build it as you go, you're building, you're sharing, you're growing. It's all happening at the same time. I appreciate that. And what I also heard her say, do it scared. It's not that you go into these things all knowing, all consuming. You've got all the answers, you've got all the resources, you got all the people. No, half of it won't be lined up. But what she said is, you're still going to do it because you're going to do it scared. And that's what we teach you here at Emma. You take risk. Even if you fail, we celebrate the failures with you. So there's no harm in taking a risk. So listen, you have to be in the room. And what I also heard her saying, I don't know if y'all heard it, but she said, it's expensive to have to get on a plane and fly all the way to France to be in Cannes, to be in the room with all the people who are the decision makers and who have all that money, honey. But she's there because she's betting on herself and her business. Now, that's not quite what she said, but that's what I heard. And that's my way of translating. Okay, so I love you, Ro. Thank you. Okay, here's another question. Oh, by the way, that last question, I like to give props. Oh, but my screen is jumping. Okay, here we go. I'm going to get into another question. Okay, I'm going to turn this. Yes, Ro is yes. Oh, I love y'all. Whole chat happening. How do you recommend new entrepreneurs stay realistic about timelines while staying motivated and keeping the target audience excited? Courtney, that sounds like that's right up your alley.
Oh man. Okay, so I think that staying realistic about timelines, also it all kind of comes back to like knowing who you are. Now I'll do a little bit of oversharing, but I have ADHD. And it really does, like, knowing this about my brain has both relieved a lot of pressure that I would put on myself to do a lot of things very urgently. And then also it allows me to understand how I do some of my very best work, which is still also under what I consider relatively tight timelines, because my brain enjoys that pressure. That is something that I think is helpful for you to know about yourself. I don't know if a conversation is being had throughout, the conference about mental health, but it is important that you know those things about who you are and how you operate. But additionally, I think staying realistic about timelines also means not overpromising to your end customer. Something that I try to manage are expectations, and that's like across the board. So when I'm dealing with a client, even when I was inside of a corporation, and someone would come to me and say, "Hey, Courtney, when do you think that you're going to have XYZ pitch deck done?" Well, if you're asking me to develop strategy plus the design for the deck plus all of these other things, it's important to lay out what all goes into this work so that people don't just think when I come back on Friday and I've given it to you that this is what you can expect all of the time, right? And so it's also just about knowing what sort of work you can do under which expectations, and then being able to communicate that. A lot can be forgiven with communication, quite frankly. And so by setting the stage for something to be a lighter, less stressful experience for yourself, you also find that you keep more solid relationships with people because they don't have unrealistic timelines and expectations from you either. But then I think inside of that, keeping your audience excited is about talking to them about what's happening as it's happening. I go back and forth about if I like founder facing content or not. I think it puts a lot of pressure specifically on Black women to show up in a very specific sort of way that can sometimes be unforgiving when you let people into the struggles of your business. I think there's something about letting people know about how your brain works through what you're experiencing, as you've solved for it, right? Bringing people into the problem when it's not their problem to solve. I don't know how I feel about that. It's not something that I think I would recommend because memory is long and people tend to hold those things against you. But I would say that you can let your audience in on what you complete as you are completing it. And they don't even need to know what the full end goal is as long as people understand that some progress is being made. So, yeah, I'd say that.
I am so here for this. I'm mad at the time. I mean, I got to ask such good questions. I got to get to the questions in the chat. We have to do like a part two because I feel like we just started to get into this and there's so much more to get into, even around how you celebrate failure. We've talked about celebrating failure for the last 2 days. And while I talk about it in theory, if you can just give an example, Rodney, because I know in your work, it's not because everything goes well that you stay fulfilled and feeling full. You do that from a spiritual place. How do you create this bridge so that you stay focused about what the mission is? And even when things aren't going well, you still find a way to tell yourself, we're in it for good. Failure is not an option in the sense of give up.
I was on mute and I was just sitting here in the church pew being like, yes, yes. Can the church say amen?
Amen. Hallelujah. Yes.
I do not consider anything that has gone wrong or was a mistake a failure. I consider it a lesson. One thing that I learned, I played sports majority of my life. The best sportsmen and women are the ones that are the most forgetful and can move on quickly, pick themselves up, and go for the goal or whatever it is that they need to put that point on the board. Right now, we're going through a really tough period in America, I would say politically. And one of the things that I've really leaned on is the understanding of what our ancestors have gone through and knowing that all of the entrepreneurial spirit, particularly after Reconstruction, was not unique to where we are in some regard. And to think of what they overcame when the literacy rates were almost zero, they created schools, they created the institutions that we now are able to live and breathe and take for granted. Anything I do now is not a failure. It is a step in the right direction because I know what shoulders I stand on and where we come from. And regardless if you are Black, you are amongst what I consider the civil rights movement. And we have to carry forward for multiple reasons. But if not, because the celebration of our even existence is a part of the movement and a part of the opportunity for us to continue to excel. So don't look at anything as a failure. What you are learning through on all the mistakes, unless you are in jail, arrested, or dead, you can move past it and we can move on.
Okay, now back at you, amen. Because it's building character. That's what failure does. When we talk about celebrate the failure, you got to unpack the why behind it, not because you won't make another mistake or things won't happen. You just need to understand the why so that you know how to move differently as you move forward. Oh my God, okay. Advocating for yourself, entrepreneur relative to entrepreneur, currency, not just with senior leaders and C suite leaders, but currency with your peers. Visibility matters. No self made examples. You better speak to everybody, including the janitorial service, the kitchen staff, security, anybody in that building who you think you should be saying hello to because you actually don't know who knows whom and who has relationships with whom. And I've watched people tear their, excuse my French, ass behind stepping on toes because they didn't know they don't know who people are or who those people are connected to. Don't be that person. Be curious, be mindful of benefits in your state. Woo! Hold on. Personal credit, leverage your parents, leverage their credit if it's good. Intellectual property is IP. I wrote that down because I don't know that everybody knows. Social listening, leverage your peers. Hey, boo, you better have a hey, boo plan. Communications need to be tight and right. Don't be lax about it. Ownership and accountability goes a long way around your hallway reputation, and you better find your comfort in being uncomfortable because that's the name of the game when you want to be an entrepreneur. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Alums, I tell you all the time that you all are the gifts that keep on giving. You legit are walking billboards for the organization. And I tell potential funders, potential partners, I could show you better than I can tell you. And you three, and Feluke, and Henry, and Jules are all a part of the community that we hold near and dear. And we needed to show the living room because we got some newbies in the living room who don't know what they don't know. But I bet you they know now. Thank you. Give them a round of applause. Shout them out in the chat. I'm going to talk to you all road traveling mercies on your way back. I cannot wait to catch up with you. Stay in that room and shine and get all that money, honey. Rodney, I'm going to talk to you because we have to have a proper catch up. And Courtney, you already know when you come to New York, we're going to my favorite place to have cocktails and dinner.
Yes.
I love y'all. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is why we do what we do at the Emma Bowen Foundation, and they are the examples. Okay.